Hi everyone. In this SUP with SAP, we are going to explore the procurement that we need to do for production. Let's go ahead and get started. The production process in SAP requires us to have material on hand that we convert from either raw materials or semi-finished goods to more semi-finished goods or finished goods. So in order for us to actually explore the production process, the first thing we need to do is make sure that we have the materials on hand to satisfy our production process. So this video is not actually going to be looking at production itself. It's going to be looking at the process that we need to go through to prepare for production. And the process itself is fairly straightforward and in fact is very similar to normal procurement. But this video is actually going to show you a shortcut that we use in the classroom. You wouldn't use this in the real world, but something we do in the classroom to make procurement a little bit faster for exploring the production process. So first, we need to decide what is the semi-finished good or final product, finished good, that we actually want to produce. And for this example, I'm going to just decide arbitrarily that we're going to make 10 black deluxe touring bikes in our production process. If that's my plan, what I then need to do is determine what materials go into the production process for 10 black deluxe touring bikes. And the way I'm going to do that is using the transaction code for our bill of material. And to navigate to that transaction code, you go to Logistics, you go to Production, you go to the Master Data folder, you go to the Bill of Materials folder, and then you go to the second Bill of Material folder, and then just to make sure that we're in the right place, you go to the Material, BOM, Bill of Material. And what we're interested in is just looking at our existing Bill of Material for a specific finished goods, which is CS03. We're going to display an existing Bill of Materials. The item that I'm interested in displaying is the deluxe touring bike in black, and then I'm going to enter my 3 digits. Our production facility in the US is Dallas. And for our bill of material usage, we only have one choice in this class, and that is 1, which you can either search for or type. You don't need to do anything else on this screen. You can click the green Enter checkbox. And what you'll get is a list of either raw materials or semi-finished goods that go into the production of this product that you're interested in making. And here you can see that every bicycle that we make takes 1 frame, 1 derailleur, 1 seat kit, 1 handlebar, 1 pedal assembly, 1 chain, brake kit, warranty document, and packaging. The one exception on this list is the very top item, Touring Aluminum Wheel Assembly. You'll notice that there is a checkbox in the assembly column for the Touring Aluminum Wheel Assembly. This is not a raw material that's already ready to go. It's something that we would need to make in Dallas before we actually produce bicycles. It's a semi-finished good. And in fact, if we typed in TRWA1 and then the 3 digits that belong to each individual in the classroom, we would see a separate bill of material for the wheel assembly. And we could go get the raw materials for that assembly, and then we could make those wheel assemblies before we make our bicycles. But for today's example, since I'm using a shortcut, I'm not going to have to go through that process. I have found that manipulating this list is easier outside of SAP. I prefer to use a simple spreadsheet like Excel. So I'm going to show you a simple way to copy and paste some of this information from SAP to a separate file so that you can then easily manipulate it for later use. On my keyboard, I'm going to hit Control-Y, and you will see that my cursor changes from an arrow to black crosshairs. This now allows me to highlight more than one cell on my SAP interface. So I'm going to single click on the very first component, and I'm going to drag my mouse from that entry down to the very last quantity. So I've highlighted 3 columns and 10 different rows. After I have single clicked and dragged, I'm going to hit Control C on my keyboard, which is copy. And all that's going to happen is the highlight is going to disappear. But if I go to a different program and use Control V to paste, the information that I copied from SAP will now show up in a separate program. So Control Y to get crosshairs, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. The quantities listed in column C are for a single bicycle assembly. If I want to make more than one bicycle, I obviously need to increase these quantities. I suggested that we make 10 deluxe touring bikes, so I'm going to change these quantities from 2s and 1s to 20s and 10s. I am now going to demonstrate an optional way that you can use Excel to help you out with the process of the later procurement step we're about to show. You don't have to do what I'm about to do, but I think this will actually save you a lot of time later on. I know a little something about the next transaction, so I'm going to do some interesting spacing of the information that's in this spreadsheet. For example, I'm going to take my column B and I'm going to delete it, which is going to bring my quantities back to column B. I'm going to leave column C blank. In column D, I'm going to type the storage location where I want these items to show up. Now, most of these items are raw materials. So I'm going to type RM00 and copy that for most of these items. The one exception to that rule is my wheel assemblies. They are semi-finished goods, so their storage location is SF00. I'm going to leave columns E, F, G, H, I, and J blank. And over here in column K, I'm going to type the plant where I want all of these items to eventually be stored, which is Dallas, DL00. And I'm going to copy and paste that entry for all 10 of my items. I know at the moment this spreadsheet looks kind of funny, but later on, because of this particular spacing, we're going to be able to procure these things in SAP very easily and very quickly. The next step for our shortcut to procuring raw materials and semi-finished goods for production is MeGo. We've used MeGo in earlier videos for purchase orders, where we are receiving items from an outside vendor. That's not what we're going to be doing today, though certainly we could. In a real-world environment, we would be buying all of our raw materials from an outside vendor, then we'd be receiving them, then we'd be getting an invoice from them, and then we'd be paying that invoice, just like we demonstrated in our earlier video for procurement. But we're doing a shortcut today, so we're not actually buying these things from an outside vendor. Instead, we're going to create a goods receipt for the category Other. And it is important that when you change these two drop-downs, goods receipt and Other, that the code that shows up in the upper right-hand corner is 501. If for some reason this is not the code that shows up with this combination of drop-downs, you can change it by typing something here. For instance, I could type 551 and hit enter. And when you do, you'll get this warning message about, do you want to change the default values? And you can just click the green checkbox. And what you should see happen is whatever you entered as the default will now show up in this movement column for every single entry in your goods receipt Other MeGo. Now, 551 is not what I want. I want 501. So again, I'm going to set it, change the default, and look to see that my movement type is 501 for every single entry. Don't change the movement type for the other combinations of drop-downs. If I go back to goods receipt for a purchase order, the default movement type is 101, and that's correct. If you change this to 501, your purchase orders will not work correctly for future transactions. So be careful about changing movement types. What is movement type 501? Well, you can see the description here is receipt without a PO. And that's exactly what this is. If you actually go and search all the different types of movement, the list for 501 is receipt without purchase order into unrestricted use stock, which means you don't have a purchase order, you just get this stuff magically, which means you don't have to pay for it, you don't have to contact a vendor about it, it just shows up. This isn't very realistic. It's not often that you just receive things for free from nowhere in the real world, but this isn't the real world. We're using this shortcut to obtain raw materials, and in this case actually some semi-finished goods, magically without going through the normal process of either buying them or making them. And we do this to abbreviate the procurement process so that we can focus on the more important process, which is production. I'm going to switch over to my Excel spreadsheet where I prepped all of the different items that I need for this production. And I've got my funky spacing with all of my different columns. And I'm going to highlight everything from A1 all the way down to K10. And I'm going to copy, Control-C. And then I'm going to return to my MIGO, Goods Receipt Other, and I'm going to paste. And because I was careful about my spacing, the short text shows up correctly in the right column, the quantities show up in the quantity column, the storage location shows up in the storage location column, and the plant shows up in the plant column. You don't have to do it the way I just did it. You could manually type all of these things. You could type all the items you want, the quantities, the storage locations, and the plant. But that gets a little tedious, so I think if you spend a little bit of time up front creating your spreadsheet, it saves you a lot of time on the back end. After entering all this information, I'm going to click the green checkbox. And you'll see the short text gets converted to a more detailed description. You'll see the storage location and the plants also get more detailed descriptions. All of these items are going to show up in my inventory as soon as I save this document. This is a one-step process where these things are created without a purchase order. Just receive them in inventory. You don't have to put them away. You don't have to do anything fancy. We'll just have them. So do this very carefully, because if you end up with lots and lots of inventory, eventually you'll have to use up that inventory. So only do this sparingly and carefully. I'm looking at it. It looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And now I have all of those items in inventory ready to go for the next video, which is where we're actually going to make deluxe touring bikes. That's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.